Rapport International, professional translation and interpretation services.
You've got a brochure in English, and now you need it in another language. It's easy to do, right? Well, not so much. Stay tuned and we'll give you some hints and suggestions on how to do that. Taking a brochure from one language and putting it into another language takes someone with special skills to be able to do it accurately. And the person who specializes in this is called a foreign language desktop publisher. And they have specific skills. Number one is they know all the design programs. They don't just work in one and create pretty designs and make sure things work. They need to know them all, because if they're working across languages, the brochure can come in any language. So they know all the design programs, just like a designer would. But they're also very familiar with languages. The one that we use here speaks 5 different languages. She's got 3 of them that are fluent, but she's got familiarity with the other ones. So she's able to pick up on missing text, on the places where things need to go. She's very familiar with all the little things that it really takes. In addition to knowing the language, she also has to understand the culture. So if there's any question about colors or references or the way something is spoken about, she will also bring that back and we'll work with the client to make sure it's appropriate. So a designer really has a different skill set. They're people who are creative. They know how things put together. They know how to move the elements around. A foreign language desktop publisher isn't so much a creator. They're more culturally appropriate, make sure the language is correct. Now, if you are doing a brochure and you know it's going to go into multiple languages, there's some things that you can do in advance to make sure that it works right. The first is to write the copy in a global English. So this is English that's very clear. There's shorter sentences. There's not a lot of jargon, slang, humor, local references put into that. We'll do a video on global English writing because there's a lot to that, but you want to make sure it's written in global English. The second is use simple design elements. You don't want to put text that needs to be translated into your design elements that could be in there, because that takes a designer extra time to pull that out and redesign the item. So use it simple, because when you get into foreign language desktop publishing, you may have to move things around and adapt it to make it work. And part of this is allowing extra space, because when you translate from one language into another language, it takes more space. For example, Farfignugan. You know, the Volkswagen tagline, it's the pleasure of driving. So what you can do in one word in German, it takes 4 words to do in English, and so it's going to need more space. So foreign language desktop publisher, when they're actually working with it, appreciates a designer who's built in that extra white space that can take care of the expansion. Another thing that a desktop publisher knows is you don't want to start doing the layout until the copy is finalized and translated, because if you start doing the layout and there's still edits coming in on the translation, then it can really mess up version control, because you're going across versions and across languages, and so it's better to wait till the content is translated and then do it. And you need to plan enough time, because it's not as simple as just pulling text out and dropping it back in. There is some manipulating of the text and the format and the shrinking and the highlighting and culturally appropriating it. So it takes a little bit more time. So allow for that. So potential issues. This is what a desktop publisher can run into when they're working with foreign languages. First is the font. As a designer, you want to make sure that you're picking a font that carries over into another language. So a desktop publisher, the foreign language desktop publisher, gets in to do that. If a font isn't correct and in there, they may have to change the whole font out, and it could change the look of what you want. And some fonts don't have the special characters, like the accents or the tildes, or you know, those 2 little dots that are over the O in German, or the AE in French that kind of comes together to make a different sound. So you have to make sure that the font that you're picking will handle all the characters. Hyphenations, this varies across languages. You want to make sure that you're using if you're doing a layout that you have hyphenations in, that it's breaking at the right place, because our breaks in English are different where other ones are. Punctuation can vary. In Greek, semicolon is a question mark. The quotation marks look different. So an experienced foreign language desktop publisher is going to know little twists like this and make sure that they're looking for that as they go through. Italics. Some languages don't use italics, so if you're putting those in as a designer to call attention to an area, a foreign language desktop publisher is going to be familiar that that's not an appropriate call out for certain languages, so they might change it. Numbers in the US, we use a comma and then a period to show like cents for dollars. In some languages that's flip-flopped, and so the foreign language desktop publisher is going to know if it's something translated for a US audience, then you might keep it in the standard US way, but if it's going international, they're going to make sure that it's changed. Colors, images, these all have a real effect on how the information is received from your audience. So different colors can mean different things. Like white means wedding here in the United States, but in China it means death. Let's see. But red means happiest, joy, and excitement in China. In India, it's purity. In Japan, it can mean danger. So, if you've got a very big, bold color in a place where it's talking about something that contrasts with that, that's something that an experienced foreign language desktop publisher would be aware of, and then we can bring it back and talk about the most strategic way to handle that. Then you get into difficult languages, like character languages, or those that read right to left instead of left to right. And with experience, you have to make sure that it's set right. So when the audience is reading it, it makes sense. And sometimes the foreign language desktop publisher will have to change some of the layout or some of the elements to make sure that it's culturally appropriate. And if you are a creative designer and you're doing this, make sure that you don't group a lot of elements and put a lot in and tight and build that. Make it more mobile and flexible, so if somebody's going in to do the other languages, they've got the ability to move it around and make it appropriate. Just as any bilingual person can't be a translator because that takes a specific set of skills, any designer or person that knows how to use the design programs can't be a foreign language desktop publisher. First off, the person has to have a familiarity with the language and with the culture, because they're going to point out things that aren't working in your layout. The second thing is you want them to have experience, because the more experience they have, the quicker they're going to be able to point out particularities of your brochure or what needs to be done. You also want them to really be able to have those skills where they're detailed, of taking something that's been created and then adding them in to move around things, make them fit, highlight where they need to, knowing which text to expand, which text that they might be able to shrink to make things fit. And then keep working with the same person, because they develop more and more knowledge about what you're looking for in particular. Well, if you want to save a little bit of money, or you're a designer and you want to do it on, what are the big mistakes that you want to be careful of? First off, don't make mistakes, because it can cause you embarrassment and people aren't going to take you seriously if they pick up on something. Second is it can cost you money, because if you go to print and it's not done right, then you've got to reprint the whole brochure or design the whole item all over again. You don't want to do that. It could cost you business, because if people are looking at it and don't take you seriously, they might not come to you for business. And it also could make you liable. Say you drop some important text, or you forget to include something, or it's shrunk when it should be big. That's when it can cost you money. But if you're going to attempt it, here's what you want to be careful of. First off, try to have somebody who's familiar with the language so they understand enough about the punctuation and the hyphenations and everything that can go on. Next, make sure they're aware of the culture, so they've got some awareness of colors and how people are expecting to see things, or when they would, how they're going to approach the material, and if there's appropriate references and colors and pictures and all. On the character languages and some right to left, some of them are okay to put in instead of up and down and right to left. You can put them to read left to right, so you need to know your audience and when that would be acceptable in what places. The third is the presentation, how the material actually looks on the page, because as an American, I'm going to look at something different than maybe even an Australian would, and we both speak English, so make sure it's appropriate. And somebody from China who's in the US is going to look at something differently than somebody who's in China. So make sure you know your audience and where it's going to be read. Don't rush. That's the number one thing is you've got to take your time to do it, and then you've got to have your translator review it. So you'll incur a little bit of extra charge for that. But having the person who did the original copy review your layout can make a world of difference when it comes to making mistakes. And then know the layout conventions for each language. Be familiar with any of the marks that go on the languages. Make sure those aren't dropped. So the question really becomes, can your designer do your foreign language desktop publishing? Some can, some can't. And foreign language desktop publishers don't typically create. They typically focus on the details and adapting the materials from one language to another. So if you are a creative type, if you are not familiar with languages, you might want to leave this to the desktop publisher. In the long run, it's going to save you time and cost. But if you think, if you're bilingual and you understand the culture and you understand the languages, or you have enough of a familiarity where you feel comfortable with, sure, go for it, and make sure that you have your translator review it. With our 100% quality guarantee, our translation and our layouts are always guaranteed, so you're not going to run into any of the problems that we talked about before. Feel free to contact us for a free assessment and discuss whether you want to do it on your own or come to us. Thanks.
If you found this video helpful, please share it, leave a comment, and subscribe. If you like hearing fun language and culture facts and goofs, use the link below to subscribe to our bi-monthly Tidbit newsletter. And of course, visit our website for more information or to schedule a free translation assessment.